Education has been a significant part of all living creatures from time immemorial. Parents and other designated teachers have prepared their young to function in the world and survive on their own. Formal public education is a fairly recent development. Partisans for and against public education often don't know enough about it to make informed decisions. And so, Food for Thought Productions is pleased to present Dr. Matie Grant, whose career in education, both public and private, spans 30 years in a variety of capacities and has well equipped her to cite some factual information on this subject. Dr. Grant is currently in charge of research on education issues for the Los Angeles League of Women Voters. Here is Dr. Grant with our producer, Lee Baker, with a report on Public Education Today.
So nice to have you, Dr. Grant.
Thank you.
Because you can answer so many questions for me and a lot of people. There's a lot of conversation about education today and problems and so forth. You're doing the research for the League of Women Voters. What is your title in that capacity?
Well, I'm chair of the Education Committee for the Los Angeles League of Women Voters.
Mm-hmm.
And our purpose is to study the schools of Los Angeles and provide information so that we can make decisions about what the League of Women Voters will support and will not support, and to get that information out to the public.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of confusion about vouchers. Can you explain how that works?
Well, the way it works is, or the way it's supposed to work, anybody can provide a scholarship to a student. So it's not really a scholarship. What we're talking about when we say vouchers in the public schools, though, is that you're going to take the money that comes in to the local governing unit, the Board of Education, and divide that money, or give that money to a student to go to a specific school.
To a private school?
Oh, it may be a public school, so they say, or a charter school.
Oh, I see.
You see, the money comes in to the local Board of Education for the students of Los Angeles. Now, right now we have various kinds of programs, but they're not voucher programs, but the money is spent on the students, and the money follows the student, whether it's to a public school or a private school or a school of special need.
I see. What does the student have to do to qualify for that so that they have a choice of the school they want to go to?
Well, right now, the choices are left up to the Board of Education. You know,
so not to the parents?
Not to the parents, no.
Oh,
the parents have to request it, of course.
Yes.
But the parent does not make the final decision about whether or not the student is to go to a specific school. The Board of Education makes that decision.
I see.
So that's what the discussion is all about.
Oh, because there's a lot of confusion. Parents think all I have to do is say, I want my job.
That's right, and they can't.
That's not the way it works.
That's not the case. The way it works now. That's the way they want it to work, of course, that they wanted the parent to say, I want my kid to go to a certain school, and the Board of Education or the government or through some system will provide the money for the child to go to that school, but that's not the way it is now.
I see.
Since it's public money, it has to go the way the local elected Board of Education says that it should go.
Okay, so then they have the approval of the student. Do they also have approval of the designated school that the
Right now,
parent,
yes.
The board has to approve the school
has to approve the school, yes.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does the money flow? Does the money go to the parents, or does it go to the school?
It goes to the school.
It goes to the school.
Yes, the parents don't get the money, and in any program that I know, that the money would go to the school that is selected for the child.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about the amount of money? Is that whatever?
Now, that's where the problem comes. The amount of money is the amount of money which is agreed upon by the local Board of Education. And
what if it's not as much as the tuition for the school?
That's it. Then the parent has to provide, in this proposed thing, would have to provide the extra money.
I see.
that is needed for the child to go to the school.
So the parent may still have to put out some money.
Oh, yes, the parents definitely
And
would have to put out money.
transportation, if it's a distance, the
If
parent.
it's a distance now,
Right.
yes. If they get the regular voucher-like program that they want.
This is a lot different from the popular conception.
Yes, it is. I think it's going to be very different.
And so, now the other special schools are the charter schools.
Yes.
How does that work?
Now, a charter school is different in that it's a school within the district.
It's a public s-
It's a public school, paid for with public money, with credentialed teachers that come under the regular board rule, and they get a certain amount of money, which is divided and decided on by the Board of Education. And it's not extra money. It's the same amount of money that any other school would get. But the difference is that the community and the parents have to work with the teachers. And the teachers have to be credentialed, and they have to follow the rules of the board.
I see.
So it's very different from a private charter school or something.
Now,
Private.
The management of the school, the administrators of the school,
The charter school would
the charter schools,
come under the regular board rules.
board rules. Now, what is who requests the charter school?
Well, I suppose it can start anywhere, but usually it has to start with the community, the principals, and the teachers. And they all have to agree. You have to form a committee and work through the whole system.
Now, the impression that I had, that a lot of people have, is that parents can request.
Oh, parents can, but they have to work through the system.
I see.
They have to do it. Now, the difference between that and a private school is the private school does not have to come under all those rules. A private school, you go out and use any building as long as it meets fire code, and then it can become a school. Whereas a charter school has to meet all the codes for the Board of Education.
I see. Now, what are the requirements in private schools as far as the teachers or administrators?
In private schools, they can set it up any way they want to. As I said, they only have to have a fire-safe building. The curriculum, the teachers, everything is totally private, and the public schools or the parents have nothing to say about it. They come under the board, whichever, like for instance, if it's a church school, then
Whatever the church
whatever the
wants.
church wants, that's what
I
they
see.
have.
I
If
see.
it's a private for-profit school, then it's whatever the organization wants.
And the teachers do not have to be credentialed.
No, they do not have to have credentials. They like for them to have credentials. They like for them to continue to study and know as much as possible, but they don't have to have
They
it.
don't have to.
It can be anybody from the community.
And I understand that their pay scales are lower in
Yes,
private
I found
schools.
that. I found that, sir.
So what is the advantage of the private school that a parent might feel that they're going to get a better education in a private school when the teachers don't have to be credentialed and the curricula doesn't?
Well, I think the parents feel that they have more input. They can go to the teacher any way they want to. It's just like paying anyone else. You see, you pay them, and if they don't do what you want to, you can go somewhere else. But with the private schools, you do not have, you can't say anything about, if you find that your child is in a class with a teacher who does not know the subject matter, you can't do anything about it other than take your child out. You can tell the principal or whoever is in operating.
What if the Board of Education has allocated money for your child to go to a private school, and for one reason or another, the child does not, is either dropped or decides they don't want to go there? What happens to that money?
The money, well, I'm not too familiar with how quickly they have to return that money, but they pay for the student to go, let's say, one semester, and that money stays with that school. You can take your child out in October, but the money still stays there until the end of the term that you've contracted for.
I see. And so the parents really have nothing to do with the financing at all for
Not really.
private schools?
Not really, no. With the public money going to the private school now.
Yes.
Now, if they pay their money like most parents do,
But
they pay
that's-
by the month.
but
They don't
that's-
pay next month.
I see, but that's not a part of the voucher.
That's not a part of the
That's
voucher
not
system.
part of the voucher.
That's just a,
The charter schools, the parents, I know some of them hire a private company to run the charter school. Is that?
yes, you can. Some
That's permitted?
cities do that. In some cities, like San Francisco, for instance, they hired a private company to run certain schools, not all of them, but certain schools, and they pay that company under regular contract to operate that school. And the parents and the principals and the teachers in that school made that decision. Now, it's up to the Board of Education, as I understand in San Francisco, at the end of that term to decide whether to allow that private company to continue to run that school.
So they evaluate the school?
They evaluate it, and
I see.
as they do all of them.
I see. So they have the right to evaluate and really
Oh, yes.
a lot of input on
On a
charter
charter school.
schools, but not the private
Not a
school.
private school. No. The only thing, if you have a special needs child and you're sending a child to a special needs school under a contract with the Los Angeles School of Board of Education.
Dyslexic or
Yes, very,
something like that, or
not
deaf
just
or
dyslexia,
whatever.
but serious handicaps.
I see.
They send them to special schools.
Right.
Where there would be, say, maybe 5 or 6.
So that's supported by public money.
Some of them are, yes. And the Board of Education would more or less have to pay all of the money that's required for that student. So.
Okay, there's all these different kinds of schools.
Oh,
The other
yes.
one, all right, the other one I want to know about, ask about is the magnet schools.
Oh, yes.
That's the elite, I guess.
Well,
What are they? What are they?
those are special schools where, for instance, they have magnets for government, for music, for medicine, for art. But those schools are set up and decided, and it can be a magnet within a regular school where you have a group of children who go under a certain program, and just those children go to that school. Now, the parents request those schools, and but the Board of Education has control over it. And the parents and the teachers have to agree for the child to go to that school.
So they focus on
Special
training.
That's
really.
right. I mean, for instance, if you have a child and you want your child to go to a music magnet or a medical magnet,
Right.
a good example of a medical magnet that we studied last year was Martin Luther King Medical Magnet School in South LA, where they made this school, and they're training people for the medical field at that school.
Yes. And what grades do they cover?
I think they cover 8 through 12 in that one school.
I see. So really kind of giving extra preparation.
Oh, yes, they
for
work right
their,
with
for their
with the school.
college training later is
That's
what that
right.
is. Now, what about transportation? Who pays for that? If a child goes to a magnet school that's some distance away.
If the Board of Education decides that your child goes here, I think the board pays for it. Although you can request that your child go to a magnet school, and you have to provide the transportation yourself.
I see.
So that's called permit with transportation or permit without transportation.
I didn't realize that the Board of Education has so much control over what goes on in education in the schools. A lot of people think the parents have a whole lot more to say than is the case. So who decides who gets to be on the Board of Education? Who are these people?
The members of the Board of Education are elected by the citizens of Los Angeles and the surrounding areas that make up the Los Angeles Board of Education. And there are very heated elections every 2 years to 4 years.
I see.
And they serve 4 years, but it's staggered, so every 2 years you hear of them electing members of the Board of Education. And they're the ones. The Board of Education has everything to say, under the state, of course. The state provides a lot of the money for the board, and they make decisions.
They have the guidelines.
They have the guidelines. But
see.
the Los Angeles Board of Education has everything to do with what goes on in the schools.
And everything to do with whose child gets to go where, right?
Yes. They say it's all in the guidelines, but yes, the final decision is made with the board.
I see.
So if you don't like what's going on in your school, you go to the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the League of Women Voters concentrate on the board, because
Right. Now, does the league have any input with the Board of Education, or is it just?
we have committees that work with the community
Yes.
that consult with the Board of Education. Yes.
I see. So you do have some. You have some clout, in other words, because for one thing, you have a tremendous reputation.
Well, of course, you have to earn it.
The other big issue is curricula. Now, who decides on curricula?
The state and the board. The state has a curricula that they require the local jurisdictions to follow, but then eventually it gets down to the board decides. And then, of course, the charter schools, if they're a charter school, they get some input. And then the parents get some input too. They put the books out and the parents can study the books and go to the board and make recommendations. And so parents really have some say-so in the schools.
Yeah.
We say that the parents don't, and parents feel that they don't, but the parents really have some say.
Well, you have the parent-teachers associations.
Oh, yes, but you have, as an individual parent. But of course, like with any political system, you have to get numbers to really make any difference, because eventually they're elected to carry out your wishes.
Now, what if a school doesn't have the personnel, doesn't have the teachers for all the subjects that are required by the state? What happens then?
They have to get a waiver.
Oh.
But basically, what is taught is determined by the Board of Education. They do the best they can. But if you don't really have, what is required, like, for instance, math and science teachers, they have to get a special waiver to have a teacher teach that subject. But really, the board should ideally secure enough teachers to teach what needs to be taught.
Who decides the top of the whole Los Angeles Unified District? How is that elected? That's
Yes, you mean the president of the board?
no, I mean superintendent.
Oh, the superintendent is hired by the board.
Is hired by the board.
Is hired by the board, yes.
I see.
And
So they choose
They
the
serve
board.
under contract, and they do whatever the board wishes them to do.
I see. Now, what is the personnel that's on the Board of Education? Are they mostly educators, or what are their background?
No, they don't have to be educators. Their parents are citizens of the neighborhood in which they serve. No, the members of the Board of Education, as you know, are not necessarily educators. The parents are not educators, but the principals, all of the basic public school people have to be certified by the state.
I see. Is busing still going on? Is that program still in effect? Taking children from one side of the city to the other side of the city?
Well, only at let's say, they're doing the best they can. They still have a whole apparatus in place. But the thing that has happened, I think, is that the housing, the classrooms for the students determine which students are bused and which are not bused.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the neighborhood and the schools decide whether they want to go on, they call it 60-40 or some sort of plan, so that they don't have to get on a bus and go somewhere. Or if you want to go to a year-round school, you have to get on a bus and go to a school that is year-round.
Suppose I have a child, and I'm living in a rather poor neighborhood, and I would like my child to go to school in Beverly Hills.
Well, Beverly Hills is a different district. So Beverly Hills would have to want your child.
I see.
And then you would have to get a request and get a regular transfer to Beverly Hills. And they did that at one time.
Oh,
But not, and they still do, I guess.
And
But
oth-
not as much as they used to.
But the targeted school has to, they have the
They
say
have
so.
to, they have the final say-so.
They have approval of
That's right.
who and how many they will take in.
That's right.
In other words,
The parents just cannot request a school in a different area and get that school.
I see. What would you recommend to a parent who wants the best education for their child?
Get prepared to spend lots of time and money. But if you do, the parent, no matter where the child goes to school, whether it's a private school or charter school or public school, the parent has to spend so much time with that child because the parent is the final arbiter for the child,
I see.
and they have to be there. So if you want your child to get a good education, and you have to provide it. You have to
You
be
have
sure.
to participate in
You
it.
have to participate, and you have to be willing to pay for it, let's say, one way or the other.
One way or the other, if not with money, with your time.
With your time.
With your time. And how would you compare sending a child to public school or to private school? What is the advantages or disadvantages in each of those?
Well, the difference between a public school and a private school is that you get to choose the school if you go into private school. You can put your child in any hours of the day, that you want, that the school is open and that sort of thing, whereas a public school runs on a certain schedule at a certain time, and you have to. Now, as far as the success rate of the children who come out of the private schools and public schools, I think there's some data on that. There's not that much difference. The parent has to participate, get the child into a school of his choice, let's say a good school that will meet the needs of the child, and then stay with the child. And you can get just as good education in the public schools as you can with the private schools, and the information is coming in on that now.
Yes. Also, I think the public schools is a better preparation for going out into the community, which is such a multicultural community.
Oh, yes, yes.
So
You have more choice. You have more variety in a public school because they're larger.
Right.
And you can have, more
You have more choices of curricula, too.
That's right.
And programs like,
That's right.
like physical ed, sports and things like that.
Yes.
So there are more choices in the public school.
Yes.
What about preschool? What about that? How do you feel about that? Do you think that, what is the effect of putting your child in preschool?
Well, I think the information is on that too. The more experience the child has at an early age with a group.
With a group.
With a group, whether it's better for the child. The child learns faster, has more opportunity to mature, to try different things, and the child really gets along better later in life as well as then. Now, some of the Head Start schools, if this is what you're asking about, the regular Head Start program.
I'm thinking of the comparison between putting your child in a group situation, either preschool or Head Start or whatever, as compared to having the nurturing mother be the one.
Well, they still need the mother, there, and preschool, but preschool more than 3 or 4 hours a day is not the usual thing, let's say. But it's much better to start the child early. In other words, just to say that you're going to keep mother's going to stay home 5 years with the child until he's ready to go to public school doesn't do that much good.
I see. What about the parents? Both parents have to work, and so how do you deal with it? In other words, you might want to participate and so forth, and if you're working all day, and a lot of single parents have to work all day, and even with their 2 parents, it takes 2 paychecks.
That's true. That's very true. That's one of the real problems today, is having enough money to provide for the needs of the child, as well as nurturing person there all the time, whether it's mother or father. But now, if they work together, then it comes out well, where you find both the mother and the father participating in caring for the child.
Well, that's ideal, but
That's
that's
ideal.
not the majority of cases.
No, that's not the majority, but that's one way to to have both, the money to pay for the living conditions as they are today, as well as having an educated child.
So in other words, the husband and wife
Both have to work.
roles are different than it was a generation
Oh,
ago.
yes, yes, yes.
And if each one isn't going to accept the new role, the children will suffer.
That's true.
Yes. Well, what about the idea of, does the nurturing have to be the biological parent or
No,
the
no,
adoptive
it can be
parent?
any adult.
It can be any adult.
Any nurturing adult.
Right. So that's where the big brothers and the big sisters and the literacy programs, the community service people,
They can help, they can help.
they can come in.
But they need the parents at home, somebody there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. That's what makes the difference.
Yes.
So when we find these large numbers of divorces, or either men or women raising a child alone, that's where the problem comes.
It seems to me that the community has the final responsibility.
Oh yes, that's true.
And so,
Because these people are going out in the world and be members of the community.
yes.
And if we don't have nurturing educational situations, then of course the community is the one that suffers.
I asked you this question earlier about what do you say to people who no longer have children in school or don't have children in school? Why should they mentor or contribute? What is the motivation for them?
The desire to have a good neighborhood and a good city and an educated workforce. That should be the goal for business, to
Right.
get an educated workforce, because if you don't have an educated workforce, you can't have a good economy.
Yes, that's
So-
right. And if you don't, some of the schools require community service as a part of getting being graduated from school.
Yes, I've heard of those.
So we need some citizen education.
Well, yes, they have to train the students to do that. But that's not an easy thing to do.
I know.
The requirement is
But that
the
would
fact
be-
that they're requiring students to put in community service
Yes,
as a part of graduation requirements.
yes. That's not
That's
universal.
a part of that. That's part of that.
But I think if that's included in curricula
Oh,
from
yes.
beginning, from kindergarten on, it could be. Just the idea that you do have a responsibility to contribute to the community.
Oh, yes.
That would be an important.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And it starts right in the classroom.
Yes.
That
That's
you're in the
right.
classroom, we have to take care of it.
Right, right. Well, this has been just wonderful. I really appreciate you
Well, thank
taking
you.
time to
Thank
share all this information
Well, thank you.
because there's so much confusion about it.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm just glad to help.
Thank you.
We hope you have found this program intellectually stimulating and that you will continue to investigate the ideas raised here. To connect with other like-minded individuals, please contact any of the dozens of free thought organizations, such as the American Humanist Association, American Atheists, the Center for Inquiry, and Atheists United. You may also email the producer directly via leebaker27@gmail.com. This program has been distributed through the courtesy of Atheists United.